Yes. The Tale of Peter Rabbit by Beatrix Potter. Copyright 4 Little Rabbits. Also, there's a full stop at the end of every one of those lines. They wouldn't do that now. They don't put a dot after the text in this sort of thing. It's interesting. Even the little copyright there. The University of Iowa Libraries, from the library of James M. and Christine K. Wallace. XPZ5 P86P3. What the devil is this? Skipping that, and this blank page, and that one. A picture of a rabbit, hunched over a bed, with a rabbit lying in it. The Tale of Peter Rabbit. But yeah, I read that already. Once upon a time, there were 4 little rabbits, and their names were Flopsy, Mopsy, Cottontail, and Peter. Spot the odd one out. They lived with their mother in a sandbank underneath the root of a very big fir tree.
"Now, my dears,"
said old Mrs. Rabbit one morning,
"you may go into the fields or down the lane, but don't go into Mr. McGregor's garden. Your father had an accident there. He was put in a pie by Mrs. McGregor. Now run along and don't get into mischief. I am going out."
Then old Mrs. Rabbit took a basket and her umbrella and went through the wood to the baker's. She bought a loaf of brown bread and 5 currant buns. Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail, who were good little bunnies, went down the lane to gather blackberries. But Peter, who was very naughty, ran straight away to Mr. McGregor's garden and squeezed under the gate. First he ate some lettuces and some broad beans, and then he ate some radishes.
Radishes, darling, radishes. I want me some radishes.
And then, feeling rather sick, he went to look for some parsley. But round the end of a cucumber frame, whom should he meet but Mr. McGregor? Mr. McGregor was on his hands and knees planting out young cabbages, but he jumped up and ran after Peter, waving a rake and calling out, "Stop, thief!" Peter was most dreadfully frightened. He rushed all over the garden, for he had forgotten the way back to the gate. He lost one of his shoes among the cabbages, and the other shoe amongst the potatoes. After losing them, he ran on 4 legs and went faster, so that I think he might have got away altogether, if he had not unfortunately run into a gooseberry net and got caught by the large buttons on his jacket. It was a blue jacket with brass buttons, quite new. Peter gave himself up for lost and cried big tears, but his sobs were overheard by some friendly sparrows who flew to him in great excitement and implored him to exert himself. Mr. McGregor came up with a sieve, which he intended to pop upon the top of Peter. But Peter wriggled out just in time, leaving his jacket behind him, and rushed into the tool shed and jumped into a can. It would have been a beautiful thing to hide in if it had not had so much water in it. Mr. McGregor was quite sure that Peter was somewhere in the tool shed, perhaps hidden underneath a flower pot. He began to turn them over carefully, looking under each. Presently, Peter sneezed. "Curtice you!" That's what it says. Mr. McGregor was after him in no time, and tried to put his foot upon Peter, who jumped out of a window, upsetting 3 plants. The window was too small for Mr. McGregor, and he was tired of running after Peter. He went back to his work. Peter sat down to rest. He was out of breath and trembling with fright, and he had not the least idea which way to go. Also, he was very damp with sitting in that can. After a time, he began to wander about, going lippity-lippity, not very fast, and looking all around. He found a door in a wall, but it was locked, and there was no room for a fat little rabbit to squeeze underneath. An old mouse was running in and out over the stone doorstep, carrying peas and beans to her family in the wood. Peter asked her the way to the gate, but she had such a large pea in her mouth that she could not answer. She shook her head at him. Peter began to cry again. Then he tried to find his way straight across the garden, but he became more and more puzzled. There surely never was such a garden for cabbages. Hundreds and hundreds of them, and Peter was not tall enough to see over them, and felt too sick to eat them. It was just like a very bad dream. In the middle of the garden he came to a pond where Mr. McGregor filled his water cans. A white cat was staring at some goldfish. She sat very, very still, but now and then the tip of her tail twitched as if it were alive. Peter thought it best to go away without speaking to her. He had heard about cats from his cousin, little Benjamin Bunny. He went towards the tool shed again, but suddenly there was a most peculiar noise. Scratch, 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 scratch. Peter scuttered underneath the bushes. Then someone began to sing. 3 blind mice! 3 blind mice! 3 blind mice! 3 blind mice! It sounded disagreeable to Peter. It made him feel as though his own tail were going to be cut off. His fur stood on end. After a time, as nothing happened, Peter came out and climbed upon a wheelbarrow and peeped over. The first thing he saw was Mr. McGregor hoeing onions. His back was turned towards Peter, and beyond him was the gate! Mr. McGregor caught sight of him at the corner! But Peter did not care. He slipped underneath the gate and was safe at last in the wood, outside the garden. Mr. McGregor hung up the little jacket and the shoes for a scarecrow to frighten the blackbirds. Blackbirds, excuse me. Shouldn't have pronounced it that way. Peter never stopped running or looked behind him till he got home to the big fir tree. He was so tired that he flopped down upon the nice soft sand on the floor of the rabbit hole and shut his eyes. His mother was busy cooking. She wondered what he had done with his clothes. It was the second little jacket and pair of shoes that Peter had lost in a fortnight. Most peculiar, it had been. It was really most provoking for Peter's mother, because she had not very much money to spend upon new clothes. She earned her living by knitting rabbit wool mittens and muffetees. I once bought a pair at a bazaar. She also had a little field in which she grew herbs and rabbit tobacco. This is what we call lavender. She hung it up to dry in the kitchen in bunches, which she sold for a penny apiece to her rabbit neighbours in the warren. Did you ever happen to see a little old buck rabbit enjoying a pipe of rabbit tobacco? I am sorry to say that Peter was not very well during the evening, in consequence of having eaten too much in Mr. McGregor's garden. His mother put him to bed and made some chamomile tea, and she gave a dose of it to Peter.
1 tablespoonful to be taken at bedtime.
But Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail had bread and milk and blackberries for supper. And that's the end of the story. That's the end. These ancient little children's stories are surprisingly subtle with the morals. Maybe subtle's not the word, but in any modern children's story or cartoon or whatever that's trying to teach them a lesson, it's guaranteed that somebody would just come flat out and say it right at the end. And they just assume the children are too stupid to get the hint. There'd be somebody would have to just bluntly say, "Now, we've learned today that being a good person is a good thing." essentially. But there's none of that in this. Squirrel Nutkin and Peter Rabbit just leave it entirely to the reader to figure out that you shouldn't go trespassing on people's land, and you shouldn't be rude to strangers. Or, well, rude to anybody, I suppose. Squirrel Nutkin very nearly meets the fate of, like, the child-friendly version of the fate at the hands of a paedophile, basically. And Peter Rabbit almost gets shot with a blunderbuss, like the Teletubbies creators ran the risk of doing every day when they filmed on his farm. So I think out of all these Beatrix Potter animal characters, Peter Rabbit is the most famous one. Is that right? I think he is. He's certainly the one. He's like the one I know the most. I think Jemima Puddle Duck is another one. Jemima Puddle Duck and Squirrel Nutkin and Peter Rabbit are pretty much the only ones I've ever heard of. Only ones I can think of, at least. So I think I'll cover, if Jemima Puddle Duck was indeed the other one, then I'll find that and read that one out too. And then, feeling rather sick, in your own time, Windows Photo Viewer, in your own time. Nobody said you had to be the fastest gun in the West to load the Peter Rabbit pictures, but, well, it certainly helps. And furthermore, can I ask you why you're taking so long to do so? It's rather unbecoming of a computer application of the 2010s. Honestly, it's not terribly difficult. It is not terribly intensive on one's computer system's processor to load a JPG image of a 100-year-old storybook for small children. Deary me, whatever has the world come to? Cor blimey, governor, I mean, struth. What's the right idea then? I'm gonna have to open the Internet Explorer version of this, eh? I think I am. Well, I've come this far, I might as well do so. Nothing will stop me. Not in my meaningless quest to read a 100-year-old children's storybook. Come on, get the move of the ship. Open yourself up, you stupid JPG. I see you there. You're gonna be opened by me. There's no breaking around it. No two ways about it, mate. Come on, you can't escape me. You might as well give up right now. Just give up right now. Just give it right now, you. Just give it right now, you stupid Windows 2000 and Windows Photo Viewer. Just give it now, you stupid Windows 2000 Photo Viewer. You don't have what it takes to beat me. You don't have what it takes. You can try and resist as long as you want. You're never going to manage to do it. You're not going to outdo me. I'll sit here and wait for you to load as long as it takes. I'll sit here and wait for you to load as long as it takes. So you might as well just stop pretending to be able to compete with me. You might as well. You should give up your act now. You should quit while you're ahead. You can't stare me down. I'll stare into your soul and make you back off. And you'll be sorry you ever crossed my path. Wow. Well, as I was saying then, if you're not sick, he went home to look for some parsley. When Peter Rabbit went home to look for some parsley, he found himself in possession of parsley. When Peter Rabbit went to get some parsley, Peter Rabbit was off to find parsley. Parsley was what Rabbit Peter procured to satisfy his sickness. And then they went to Sclord. When Peter Rabbit came for parsley from Mr. McGregor, Peter Rabbit knew that he was being rather naughty, but Peter knew the best of all just what it means to be a rabbit. Round the end of a cucumber frame, whom should he meet? Holy smokes, whom using the word whom. I mean, this was back, well, that was back in the day and age when people used that word. Although if TV tropes is anything to go by, people still use that word. I hate the word whom. I can't believe this hasn't come up I can't believe this hasn't cropped up at any point in, like, the Team Sponkel relations so far. I hate whom. The word whom is a waste of space. Kill it. Kill it with fire. Kill whom. Whom needs to die. I hate that word. I hate the word whom. I hate how everybody that uses it is like, knows how weird it sounds, but they just think they're so great for knowing the correct application. Nobody uses the word whom nowadays except to sound clever. You can't argue that. The only reason anybody uses the word whom now is to sound clever. But Peter Rabbit was a rambunctious young whipper-muffin, castigated by his mother, doomed to haunt the halls of Arvich House for all time.
Curtised you!
Peter sneezed.
Curtised you! The Tale of Jemima Puddle Duck. The Tale of Jemima Puddle Duck. The Tale of Jemima Puddle Duck by Beatrix Potter, author of The Tale of Peter Rabbit and C. A farmyard tale for Ralph and Betsy. What a funny sight it is to see a brood of ducklings with a hen. Listen to the story of Jemima Puddle Duck, who was annoyed because the farmer's wife would not let her hatch her own eggs. Her sister-in-law, Mrs. Rebecca Puddle Duck, was perfectly willing to leave the hatchling to someone else.
I have not the patience to sit on a nest for 28 days, and no more have you, Jemima. You would let them go cold, you know you would. I wish to hatch my own eggs. I will hatch them all by myself,
quacked Jemima Puddle Duck. She tried to hide her eggs, but they were always found and carried off. Jemima Puddle Duck became quite desperate. She determined to make a nest right away from the farm. She set off on a fine spring afternoon along the cart road that leads over the hill. She was wearing a shawl and a poke bonnet. When she reached the top of the hill, she saw a wood in the distance. She thought it looked like a safe, quiet spot. Jemima Puddle Duck was not much in the habit of flying. She ran downhill a few yards, flapping her shawl, and then she jumped off into the air. She flew beautifully when she had got a good start. She skimmed along over the treetops until she saw an open place in the middle of the wood, where the trees and brushwood had been cleared. Jemima alighted rather heavily and began to waddle about in search of a convenient, dry nesting place. She rather fancied a tree stump amongst some tall foxgloves. But, seated upon the stump, she was startled to find an elegantly dressed gentleman reading a newspaper. He had black prick ears and sandy-coloured whiskers.
Correct,
said Jemima Puddle Duck, with her head and her bonnet on one side.
Correct.
The gentleman raised his eyes above his newspaper and looked curiously at Jemima.
Madam, have you lost your way?
Said he. He had a long bushy tail which he was sitting on, as the stump was somewhat damp. Jemima thought him mighty civil and handsome. Ew! Charlie!
Oh dear. Oh man, that's a flashback. Oh, forgot about that.
Charlie! Oh, Charlie! Hey, Charlie! How are you doing, Charlie? Charlie!
You don't know what I'm talking about, do you?
She explained that she had not lost her way, but that she was trying to find a convenient dry nesting place.
Ah, is that so? Indeed,
said the gentleman with sandy whiskers, looking curiously at Jemima. He folded up the newspaper and put it in his coat-tail pocket. Jemima complained of the superfluous hen.
Indeed, how interesting. I wish I could meet that fowl. I would teach it to mind its own business. But as to a nest, there is no difficulty. I have a sack full of feathers in my woodshed. No, my dear madam, you will be in nobody's way. You may sit there as long as you like,"
said the bushy, long-tailed gentleman. He led the way to a very retired, dismal-looking house amongst the foxgloves. It was built of faggots and turf, and there were 2 broken pails, one on top of another, by way of a chimney.
"This is my summer residence. You would not find my winter house so convenient,"
said the hospitable gentleman. There was a tumble-down shed at the back of the house, made of old soap boxes. The gentleman opened the door and showed Jemima in. The shed was almost quite full of feathers. It was almost suffocating, but it was comfortable and very soft. Jemima Puddle Duck was rather surprised to find such a vast quantity of feathers. But it was very comfortable, and she made a nest without any trouble at all. When she came out, the sandy-whiskered gentleman was sitting on a log reading the newspaper. At least, he had it spread out, but he was looking over the top of it. He was so polite that he seemed almost sorry to let Jemima go home for the night. He promised to take great care of her nest until she came back again next day. He said he loved eggs and ducklings. He should be proud to see a fine nestful in his woodshed. Jemima Puddle Duck came every afternoon. She laid 9 eggs in the nest. They were greeny white and very large. The foxy gentleman admired them immensely. He used to turn them over and count them when Jemima was not there. At last, Jemima told him that she intended to begin to sit next day. "And I will bring a bag of corn with me, so that I need never leave my nest until the eggs are hatched. They might catch cold," said the conscientious Jemima.
"Madam, I beg you not to trouble yourself with a bag. I will provide oats. But before you commence your tedious sitting, I intend to give you a treat. Let us have a dinner party, all to ourselves. May I ask you to bring up some herbs from the farm garden to make a savoury omelette? Sage and thyme and mint and 2 onions, and some parsley. I will provide lard for the omelette,"
said the hospitable gentleman with sandy whiskers. Jemima Puddle Duck was a simpleton. Not even the mention of sage and onions made her suspicious. She went round the farm garden, nibbling off snippets of all the different sorts of herbs that are used for stuffing roast duck. And she waddled into the kitchen and got 2 onions out of a basket. The collie dog, Cap, met her coming out.
"What are you doing with those onions? Where do you go every afternoon by yourself, Jemima Puddle Duck?"
Jemima was in awe of the collie. She told him the whole story. The collie listened, with his wise head on one side. He grinned when she described the polite man with sandy whiskers. He asked several questions about the wood, and about the exact position of the house and shed. Then he went out and trotted down the village. He went to look for 2 foxhound puppies who were out at walk with the butcher. Jemima Puddle Duck went up the cart road for the last time on a sunny afternoon. She was rather burdened with bunches of herbs and 2 onions in a bag. She flew over the wood and alighted opposite the house of the bushy, long-tailed gentleman. He was sitting on a log. He sniffed the air and kept glancing uneasily around the wood. When Jemima alighted, he quite jumped.
"Come into the house as soon as you have looked at your eggs. Give me the herbs for the omelette. Be sharp."
He was rather abrupt. Jemima Puddle Duck had never heard him speak like that. She felt surprised and uncomfortable. While she was inside, she heard pattering feet round the back of the shed. Someone with a black nose sniffed at the bottom of the door and then locked it. Jemima became much alarmed. A moment afterwards, there were most awful noises, barking, baying, growls and howls, squealing and groans. And nothing more was ever seen of that foxy, whiskered gentleman. Presently, Cap opened the door of the shed and let out Jemima Puddle Duck. Unfortunately, the puppies rushed in and gobbled up all the eggs before he could stop them. He had a bite on his ear, and both of the puppies were limping. Jemima Puddle Duck was escorted home in tears on account of those eggs. She laid some more in June, and she was permitted to keep them herself, but only 4 of them hatched. Jemima Puddle Duck said that it was because of her nerves, but she had always been a bad sitter.
Oh, they took my freaking kidney!
The Tale of Tom Kitten by Beatrix Potter. Dedicated to all pickles, especially to those that get upon my garden wall. Once upon a time there were 3 little kittens, and their names were Mittens, Tom Kitten, and Moppet. They had dear little fur coats of their own, and they tumbled about the doorstep and played in the dust. But one day their mother, Mrs. Tabitha Twitchett, expected friends to tea, so she fetched the kittens indoors to wash and dress them before the fine company arrived. First she scrubbed their faces. This one is Moppet. Then she brushed their fur. This one is Mittens. Then she combed their tails and whiskers. This is Tom Kitten. Tom was very naughty, and he scratched. Mrs. Tabitha dressed Moppet and Mittens in clean pinafores and tuckers, and then she took all sorts of elegant, uncomfortable clothes out of a chest of drawers in order to dress up her son Thomas. Tom Kitten was very fat, and he had grown. Several buttons burst off. His mother sewed them on again. When the 3 kittens were ready, Mrs. Tabitha unwisely turned them out into the garden to be out of the way while she made hot buttered toast. Now keep your frocks clean, children. You must walk on your hind legs. Keep away from the dirty ash pit, and from Sally Henny Penny, and from the pigsty, and the puddle ducks. Moppet and Mittens walked down the garden path unsteadily. Presently they trod upon the pinafores and fell on their noses. When they stood up, there were several green smears. Let us climb up the rockery and sit on the garden wall, said Moppet. They turned their pinafores back to front and went up with a skip and a jump. Moppet's white tucker fell down into the road. Tom Kitten was quite unable to jump when walking upon his hind legs in trousers. He came up the rockery by degrees, breaking the ferns and shedding buttons right and left. He was all in pieces when he reached the top of the wall. Moppet and Mittens tried to pull him together. His hat fell off, and the rest of his buttons burst. While they were in his manor and picked up the various articles. But he put them on himself. They fitted him even worse than Tom Kitten. "It's a very fine morning," said Mr. Drake Puddleduck. And he and Jemima and Rebecca Puddleduck set off up the road, keeping step, pit-pat, paddle-pat, pit-pat, waddle-pat. Then Tabitha Twitchit came down the garden and found her kittens on the wall with no clothes on. She pulled them off the wall, smacked them, and took them back to the house. "My friends will arrive in a minute, and you are not fit to be seen. I am affronted," said Mrs. Tabitha Twitchit. She sent them upstairs, and I am sorry to say that she told her friends that they were in bed with the measles, which was not true. Quite the contrary, they were not in bed, not in the least. Somehow there were very extraordinary noises overhead, which disturbed the dignity and repose of the tea party, and I think that someday I shall have to make another larger book to tell you more about Tom Kitten. As for the Puddle Ducks, they went into a pond. The clothes all came off directly because there were no buttons, and Mr. Drake Puddleduck and Jemima and Rebecca have been looking for them ever since.
And Squirrel Nutkin. The Tale of Squirrel Nutkin by Beatrix Potter. F1 Coral to the death.
Was that written like that in the original version, Crumbs? Wikipedia?
The Tale of Squirrel Nutkin.
The Tale of Squirrel Nutkin. How many times? The Tale of Squirrel Nutkin. The Tale of Squirrel Nutkin. The Tale of Squirrel Nutkin. The Tale of Squirrel Nutkin.
By Beatrix Potter, author of The Tale of Peter Rabbit. London, Frederick Ward.
Yeah, I don't need to see that.
A story for Nora. This is a tale about a tale that belonged to a little red squirrel, and his name was Nutkin. He had a brother called Twinkleberry, and a great many cousins. They lived in a wood at the edge of a lake. In the middle of the lake there is an island covered with trees and nut bushes, and amongst those trees stands a hollow oak tree, which is the house of an owl who is called Old Brown.
Old Brown? What a stupid name.
One autumn, when the nuts were ripe and the leaves on the hazel bushes were golden and green, Nutkin and Twinkleberry and all the other little squirrels came out of the wood and down to the edge of the lake. They made little rafts out of wigs, and they paddled away over the water to Owl Island to gather nuts. Each squirrel had a little sack and a large oar, and spread out his tail for a sail. They also took with them an offering of free...
Oh my goodness!
They also took with
an offering... Why couldn't the owl have been called Twinkleberry?
They also took with them an offering of 3 fat mice as a present for Old Brown, and put them down upon his doorstep. Then Twinkleberry and the other little squirrels each made a low bow and said politely, "Old Mr. Brown, will you favour us with permission to gather nuts upon your island?" But Nutkin was excessively impertinent in his manners. He bobbed up and down like a little red... cherry, singing, riddle me, rot, tot, tote, a little wee man in a red, red coat, a staff in his hand and a stone in his throat. If you tell me this riddle, I'll give you a groat. Now, this riddle is as old as the hills. Mr. Brown paid no attention whatever to Nutkin. He shut his eyes obstinately and went to sleep. The squirrels filled their little sacks with nuts and sailed away home in the evening. But next morning they all came back again to Owl Island, and Twinkleberry and the others brought a fine fat mole and laid it on the stone in front of Old Brown's doorway and said, Mr. Brown, will you favour us with your gracious permission to gather some more nuts? But Nutkin, who had no respect, began to dance up and down, tickling old Mr. Brown with a nettle and singing, Old Mr. B, riddle me ree, hitty-pitty within the wall, hitty-pitty without the wall. If you touch hitty-pitty, hitty-pitty will bite you. Mr. Brown woke up suddenly and carried the mole into his house. He shut the door in Nutkin's face. Presently, a little thread of blue smoke from a wood fire came up from the top of the tree, and Nutkin peeped through the keyhole and sang, A house fool, a hole fool, and you cannot gather a bowl full. The squirrels searched for nuts all over the island and filled their little sacks. But Nutkin gathered oak apples, yellow and scarlet, and sat upon a beech stump playing marbles and watching the door of old Mr. Brown. On the third day, the squirrels got up very early and went fishing. They caught 7 fat minnows as a present for Old Brown. The squirrels ate the squirrels, the squirrels ate the squirrels, squirrels, the squirrels, squirrels. The squirrels searched for nuts all over the island and filled their little sacks, but Nutkin gathered oak apples, yellow and scarlet, and sat upon a beech stump playing marbles and watching the door of old Mr. Brown. They paddled over the lake and landed under a crooked chestnut tree on Owl Island. Twinkleberry and 6 other little squirrels each carried a fat minnow, but Nutkin, who had no nice manners, brought no present at all. He ran in front, singing, The man in the wilderness said to me, How many strawberries grow in the sea? I answered him as I thought good, As many red herrings as grow in the wood. But old Mr. Brown took no interest in riddles, not even when the answer was provided for him. On the 4th day, the squirrels brought a present of 6 fat beetles, which were as good as plums in plum pudding for Old Brown. Each beetle was wrapped up carefully in a dock leaf, fastened with a pine needle pin. Each beetle was wrapped up in a dock leaf, but Nutkin sang as rudely as ever. Old Mr. B, riddle me ree. Flower of England, fruit of Spain, met together in a shower of rain, put in a bag tied round with a string. If you want to read that story about Squirrel Nutkin, got a tail to tell, the Squirrel Nutkin, 7 years, Squirrel Nutkin, can't read and tell, Squirrel Nutkin. I want to read the tale of the squirrel.
There.
If you'll tell me this riddle, I'll give you a ring. Which was ridiculous of Nutkin because he had not got any ring to give to Old Brown. The other squirrels hunted up and down the nut bushes, but Nutkin gathered Robin's pincushions off a briar bush and stuck them full of pine needles. Because that's just the kind of thing Squirrel Nutkin did.
On the 5th day, the squirrels brought a present from wild honey. It was so sweet and sticky that they licked their fingers as they put it down upon the stone. They had stolen it out of a bumblebee's nest on the tippity top of the hill. Bumblebees, bumblebees, bumblebees. But Norkin skipped up and down, singing, "Hum-a-bum, buzz, buzz, hum-a-bum, buzz." As I went over Tippledine, I met a flock of bonny swine, some yellow-necked, some yellow-backed. They were the very bonniest swine that e'er went over Tippledine. Old Mr. Brown turned up his eyes in disgust at the impertinence of Nutkin, but he ate up the honey. The squirrels filled their little sacks with nuts, but Nutkin sat upon a big flat rock and played ninepins with a crab apple and green fir cones. On the 6th day, which was Saturday, the squirrels came again for the last time. They brought a new laid egg in a little rush basket as a last parting present for Old Brown. But Nutkin ran in front laughing and shouting, "Humpty Dumpty lies in the beck, with a white counterpane round his neck. 40 doctors and 40 rights cannot put Humpty Dumpty to rights." Now old Mr. Brown took an interest in eggs. He opened one eye and shut it again, but still he did not speak. Nutkin became more and more impertinent. "Old Mr. B! Old Mr. B! Hickamore, hackamore on the king's kitchen door. All the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't drive Hickamore, hackamore off the king's kitchen door." Nutkin danced up and down like a sunbeam, but still Old Brown said nothing at all. Nutkin began again. Arthur Bower has broken his band. He comes roaring up the land. The King of Scots with all his power cannot turn Arthur off the bower." Nutkin made a whirring noise to sound like the wind, and he took a running jump right onto the head of Old Brown. Then, all at once, there was a flutterment and a scufflement and a loud squeak. The other squirrels scuttered away into the bushes. When they came back very cautiously, peeping round the tree, there was Old Brown sitting on his doorstep, quite still, with his eyes closed, as if nothing had happened. But Nutkin was in his waistcoat pocket. This looks like the end of the story, but it isn't. Old Brown carried Nutkin into his house and held him up by the tail, intending to skin him. But Nutkin pulled so very hard that his tail broke in two, and he dashed up the staircase and escaped out of the attic window. And to this day, if you meet Nutkin up a tree and ask him a riddle, he will throw sticks at you and stamp his feet and scold and shout, "Cock, cock, 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 cock."
Sheesh. What kind of story was that? So basically Squirrel Nutkin didn't actually learn any moral lessons, it seems. Like he still chucks sticks at people that come near him. Squirrel Nutkin just escapes from Mr. Brown, and that's it. And also Twinkleberry doesn't even have a reason to exist. I'm disappointed in that. There's no reason for Twinkleberry to even be in this story. He doesn't even get mentioned again after like halfway through. I really don't know why he was even in it at all. But I'm more disappointed that Twinkleberry is male in this. Yeah, so that was this Tale of Squirrel Nutkin for you. I just read this purely to see what role Twinkleberry played, and the answer was pretty much none at all. But
looking. Hey, what? What's this? What's the bright idea? Out to the screen! Why have I lost control of the computer? No! That's better. You. A second there, I thought I'd lost control.
Ooh, yeah. Oh, sweet. These are my jams. This is my blackcurrant jam. That's my raspberry jam over there. There's my orange jam. Lemon jam. Every jam. All of the jams.
Yeah, sloop. Whoa, groovy. Yeah, boogie.
Do the Charleston. Dashing white sergeant. Jive turkey coming through.
That again! What's my idea?
You have to wait and see. I just gotta wait for this nonsense to stop. Come on then, get on with it. I want to get back to the screen so I can continue to read the story. Please, read the story.